ChatGPT seems like it can create some element of content in a way that was never before possible, but there's still a huge human element and value that has to be added. And I think it's going to create opportunities for new companies. We're already seeing a lot of new companies, of course. I watched part of the previous keynote, and the amount of money, and I had never heard of most of these companies. But I think there's also going to be a real opportunities for early stage entrepreneurial ideas that can be impactful through these various industries. And I find that very exciting.
Thank you for highlighting this concept of innovation, that it's not only about a product or a brilliant idea, but it could be, a process innovation. It could be how you disrupt, the value chain or the supply chain, as you mentioned. Many times, people think that innovation is only the brightest product, the patent you can create, but there are multiple forms, and you can do innovation wherever you are.
Yeah, the fit between the innovation and the business model, whether you call it product market fit or whatever, is a real challenge, because that's how you actually realize value. And the technologies that I get most excited about are ones that are sort of business model agile. Like, you could take it and build an end product, or you could just sell a piece of software, because we're talking about disintegration of supply chains. Things happen where all of a sudden stuff gets integrated, and you might be left in the cold because your whole plan, your entry point, got shut down by some event outside of your control. So agility, I think, is also really...
And for an aspiring entrepreneur, you can target the small to medium-sized business segment, where the Microsofts aren't there yet, or we're not focused on that yet.
Pay attention.
And get some traction before,
Actually, we're looking for partners in that area, it's a partner-led business for us.
Sure.
So building partnerships with companies who have that focus and that expertise to serve this segment is super valuable to us. But let me take the point of the business model. Professor, I get to you now. You are teaching entrepreneurship at the MIT. Can you share with the audience, with aspiring entrepreneurs or with existing entrepreneurs who are looking to innovate from a business model perspective, if you see any emerging new business models that are coming up because of this acceleration in the digital technologies?
Well, first, I would say there is no such thing as teaching entrepreneurship. There are entrepreneurs, and you direct them maybe in a direction or whatever, but it's in blood. I mean, the type of entrepreneur that I see coming through MIT and other places is just so focused and so driven, persistent and patient. All of those things. And usually they're on their second or third round of doing something, which is great. The new business models, there's just so many new tools for entrepreneurs to use to compete with the big players. So, when you started a company, back in your day when you started a company, you probably had to put together your own data center. You had to do your own, instead of calling up Amazon and tapping in for very inexpensive pricing. So you can start a company today as an entrepreneur with so much less drag.
Virtual everything.
Virtually everything without the drag of building an infrastructure around that. Tapping into the sources, you get Salesforce CRM online. You do all these things up and running.
It allows you to focus on what you really need to be focusing on.
Exactly.
Instead of buying
and that's the idea, the vision, and focusing, carrying on that, instead of all the negatives of pulling you down and having the data center go down and the IT and most importantly, the security, which you can get, whereas before there was very little security and you were at risk at all times. So I think that today's entrepreneur has so much more to tap into to be successful than in the past. And that's a great thing. And so that means that the ideas are going to advance faster, and instead of being pulled down by the business model of the day-to-day whatever. So,
and time to market is faster,
and
winning customers is faster, growing and scaling up is faster.
And agility and pivoting and all that is much easier.
I go back to data, which is important because the reality is that we're able to measure so much more now than we're ever able to measure in the past. Why is that relevant? It's because business models, whether it be a licensing model or something as a service or metered use or subscription fees, you were sort of married for a longer period of time to your business model in generations past. Now, the structured data and cloud computing allow you to measure everything. And that's where you can really focus on where are you creating value for your customer. It's pretty simple for me in that, you're able to extract revenue where you can extract and create value. And so what structured data and cloud computing has allowed us to do now is to be able to change business models and innovate our business model much more rapidly in a much more agile way, because we may find that in many cases, right, multi-time entrepreneurs, as Chuck mentioned, the more times you're at bat, the more likelihood of success. Well, the ability to actually be able to quickly monetize using data sets in terms of how you're creating value, that puts you in a position where you're not actually painting yourself into a corner with an original business model that may not scale.
Yeah.
But selecting the right data to look at, that's an art now.
Data overflow.
Because there are so many,
Yeah.
and you need to be focused and to be really intentional about the ones you use and the ones you measure yourself against.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
The old adage that everybody loves.
Yeah. But now you're actually able to just measure so much more, even historically, that you can go back. And we talk a lot about everything that we build at Stavvy. We really focus around observability. How can we see what is happening in real time, but also be able to go back and look at what customers have done in the past and how we can create more value for them.
Let me pause for a minute to ask the audience to send us questions. I haven't seen any questions coming in yet. We will be having some time for questions, so we welcome you to help us, and so that I can be a bit lazier later on. I will start with Michael and then Costa on the same question. You are both entrepreneurs, and we discussed about how technology is moving fast, and it enables a lot more. It gives us a lot of opportunity. At the same time, we are all operating in an environment that is very uncertain. It's moving also very fast. We've been having multiple crises over the past years: the pandemic, the geopolitical crisis the war in Europe, the energy crisis, the inflation crisis, recently the Silicon Valley Bank and the banking crisis. I think it's an environment where, for an entrepreneur, yes, technology can support, of course, and can help build that agility. But how do you see, that blend? Technology moving fast and offering opportunity at the same time, business environment becoming harder.
Well, first of all, to sort of reiterate something that both Chuck and Costa said, second and third time entrepreneurs are often, I don't have any data. I'm sure the data's out there, but I would guess that the data would say that there's a higher likelihood of success.
There is.
And the idea behind that, and the reason, okay, if there is, then I can speak a little more factually.
And the average successful age of an entrepreneur is in their 40s.
Yeah, that I remember. So I figured I remember reading that statistic. So, and part of that is because you kind of know what is important, and when something requires a sense of urgency, or when a milestone is coming, or a guidepost that you're getting to that's a really critical one, and you've seen kind of what the consequences of doing it one way or another might have been in the past. So you're more likely to make fewer mistakes. You're not necessarily going to make the right decision always, but you might make fewer mistakes. And so I think what the environment being more difficult does is force entrepreneurs to think through more things in advance. When there's just money flowing and you can present a pitch deck, and they give you $5 million to go see what's going to happen. You don't have to think past creating the pitch deck, right?
Great.
Now you really have to be thinking about, why am I going to do this? How am I going to differentiate myself? How am I going to survive? I'm not going to be able to raise as much money as I might have been able to raise in the past. So I really have to think of that as my blood that's going to keep me alive. So how do I make the right decisions to extend that blood deposit as long as possible. So I think it creates better companies. You know, you often hear that during crises, some of the best companies are developed.
emerging.
I think it's partially because there's almost a self-filtering before the process begins when the times are difficult, because less lower quality things get off the ground.
We have a saying in Greece that the good captain is, demonstrates his skill in the midst of the storm, right?
That's right.
So
There you go.
I guess that goes for entrepreneurs as
The
well.
Greeks know everything. Long time.
We have said everything. We invented everything. Costa.
Well, I mean, look, it's true. First of all, there's no bad time to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are positioned to be able to solve a lot of problems. I know I joked earlier, but the reality is never let a good crisis go to waste. There is so much opportunity for entrepreneurs and for startups to close the gaps. It does force these types of markets flush out all of the amateurs, entrepreneurs, investors, advisors, employees. There is a washing that occurs that it flushes out, and the most resilient, the ones that have a passion, to talk a little bit about, Steve Jobs talking a little bit about, you have to be crazy to be able to do this over and over and over again, day after day after day, because it is very hard. I think as it relates to fintech and financial services, which you mentioned SVB, and the banking crisis, there is no better time, in my opinion, to be a fintech entrepreneur. Closing the gap, that connective tissue between what consumers and businesses need and what we're seeing as this massive influx of money going into SIFs, right? These significantly important financial institutions. The JP Morgans and Wells Fargos and Citibanks have had this massive influx of capital because money has moved to what is perceived safety. They are not able to scale fast enough to be able to deliver a customer experience that will give the experience that the SVBs and smaller regional banks have been able to deliver to their customers. And so as a result, this creates an opportunity for fintechs to partner with financial institutions, build that connective tissue, to create a better experience, to create products where you can interact with your financial institution and create safeguards, but also the convenience that we're used to. And so we're not going back. The reality is that technology and digitization and innovation is positioning us to be able to close the gap for access to financial services. For those of us that live in major cities, we don't have some of the pain points that people do in underprivileged or underrepresented communities, where they may only have an option of one bank that has a brick and mortar location. Or what we found through the pandemic, people had to drive to different towns or counties to find a notary to modify their loan so that it wouldn't be foreclosed, because they didn't want their neighbor to know that works at the post office that they haven't been able to pay their mortgage. It gives people the ability to interact with institutions on their terms. And it gives the power to the consumer, and that's very valuable.
If I could follow up on that, I'm on the board of a fintech company, a public company, and I hope we never compete with you, Costas. I'll tell you. But this whole Silicon Valley thing has been really disruptive and a real shame, because it was a great bank. I don't know if it was your go-to bank. It was my go-to bank many, many years. But what we serve in this company is credit unions and small community banks. And they're right now a question mark because of what Silicon Valley happened.
Yes.
And they're at a crossroads, but they have to. Your point about the large banks, they do their own digitization of all the services in fintech. The other firms need to count on people like yourself to do their part, to get them up and running, to compete with those companies, or else they couldn't compete with those companies as that shift continues to happen.
Because once the consumer goes digital, you can't get the consumer back.
It's the stickiest implementation in the history of mankind.
When's the last time you went to a bank to deposit a check?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's just the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will make one last question, because we have now an inflow of questions from the audience. So I want to give the credit to our audience for that. But before we go to that, we discussed about agility. In that environment, we discussed about agility as a key quality for an entrepreneur. Chuck, what other qualities you believe an entrepreneur should have these days to navigate this uncertainty?
I'm sitting next to one right here. No, it's a lot of persistence. It is a hard. I'm not an entrepreneur. I can teach it, but I can't be it. I didn't have the patience. I didn't have I needed an ongoing check. I had a family and all, and it is a real gamble. You're a risk taker.
Yeah.
And you cannot be disappointed, because you will be disappointed, and if it lets you knock you down, you'll not continue on as an entrepreneur. It's just a stage in your growth as an entrepreneur. And everyone has their own story that way, except he's been successful all the time.
You have to be malleable.
Yeah.
And that is something that is very hard for certain people to absorb, especially very technical people. So what I love about my businesses is I am never the smartest person in the room. That's one of the reasons that I won't leave MIT, because I'm never the smartest person in the room. And so you have to be open to receiving critical advice. You can't hire smart people and tell them what to do. You need to be able to process that information. Now, I want to be clear. There are times, and I'm not a technologist, that a decision needs to be made. And even some of the brightest technologists and my directors of engineering may have differing opinions. At some point, somebody has to take that responsibility. The malleability is in being able to respect and listen to their opinions and why they think a particular solution or architectural decision needs to be made, or a feature set. It's overwhelming, and customers and prospective customers ask you for a million things, but they're not always ready to write a check. So you need to make these decisions, and sometimes make them very quickly. And so there is certainly a concept of risk taking. I like to believe that we take an educated risk, and that we're really calculated around the types of risks that we take. I actually tell a lot of my students and my team, we don't do reckless. We can do risk, but we can't do reckless. And I would actually rather make a decision and be wrong and learn from it than not act.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that we can't get back is time. And even in this environment, you can raise capital. Yes, it's painful, but you can still raise capital. What you cannot create more of is time, and time is extraordinarily valuable. And so, being a misfit and being curious and malleable, it's a really important skill. You don't need to be charismatic, and you don't need, the reality is that those skill sets of hiring smart people around you and being able to take a tremendous amount of information and process it quickly. That's what being an entrepreneur is about. It's being a generalist, really, and being able to process information really quickly and be able to make decisions.
Well stated.
Michael, sorry?
I agree with all that, and I'll try and add, again, something on top of it. So I think that it's not an individual task. Entrepreneurship is a team sport. There's no way you're going to be able to do it yourself. So you need to embrace a team. You need to treat the members. You have to acknowledge what kind of members you need on your team. It's certainly employees, it's certainly customers, it's probably investors. Once you start looking at the employees, it's probably, if we're talking about a tech company, it's engineers, but it's also marketing and sales and support. And you really need to consider this whole team as a team of equals with respect. I think it's very important that as the leader you communicate to the team. As we go through this agility we're talking about, and the malleability and the challenges that a company's going to have, the head person is going to need to articulate what that means. You can't lie. You can't, you need to put a good face on everything, because that's part of your role someone earlier I saw said she went under the table and cried, and then would get back out and go to her team and talk about how things were going to be okay. You have to sort of do that, but most importantly, I think you need to have a clear message as to what the vision of the company is. Hopefully that doesn't change significantly during your pivots, so having a good vision is important. But I think team and communications, because that's the only way you're going to succeed, is with the right group of people around you.
The only thing I have to add to that, because it's just so important, is transparency, especially in these types of markets. When you have reductions in workforce, when you have to make difficult decisions, people are scared, and rightfully so. And they look to you for courage, they look to you for support, but they also look to you for guidance and transparency. And not being transparent with your team is a very dangerous slope, because the reality is your team should know about revenue, they should know about runway, everyone knows that joining an early stage startup or joining a startup in general, even a publicly traded technology company these days, comes with risk.
Yes.
And that's that calculated risk that we talked about. But transparency is really important because nobody wants to work for people that aren't themselves transparent. Because people will follow you, and they will believe in the broader mission and support each other. But it is important for them to understand what the headwinds and tailwinds both look like.
And I'll add to that, because that's an excellent point. Sort of compassion matters too. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be a leader, an entrepreneur, and you're going to start a company, at some point you're going to hit something unexpected, and you might have to lay people off, or you might have to fire people who you don't want to get rid of. So first of all, when you think about doing this, you have to realize that that's probably a role you're going to have to play at some point, and make sure it's something you can do, because not everyone can do that, and not everyone's comfortable doing it. But showing compassion, transparency, open communications, I think that is a huge part of success for small companies.
Because success comes from the team, right? From the people.
It does.
And
A good leader takes less of the credit and more of the blame.
yeah. No, that was very powerful. Thank you all. So I'll go to the questions from the audience now, because we have some really interesting ones and some tough ones, I have to say. So I'm going with the toughest one I read so far. How do you make technology defensible in the era of AI foundational models? There are many startups that now are worth nothing due to ChatGPT, and that comes from Ioannis.
They were probably worth nothing before ChatGPT.
Yeah.
If they're worth nothing now, that would be my first answer.
An article in the Wall Street Journal said today that the most vulnerable jobs with ChatGPT are auditors. The least are short order cooks. So you may want to redirect your career at this time.
Yeah.
So I will add the following. It's interesting to Michael's point that they were probably worth nothing. Maybe perhaps true, but the reality is that uncertainty is the one certain.
Yeah.
And so when you are building a company, I see so many entrepreneurs do primary market research and a competitive analysis at the onset, and then they go to work. But then they stop. Mm-hmm. Market research and watching your competition never stops. When you don't wake up in the morning paranoid,
yes,
you have decided that your business is going to be at risk. You have to wake up every single morning saying to yourself, who is here to take it away from me? Mm-hmm. Whether you're successful or not, or whether you're growing, whether you're in growth mode, later stage, early stage, you have to keep your eyes on the competitive analysis. You have to keep an eye on the market and see where the market is going. And if you're not doing that, you're being reckless.
Yeah. I would add the agility topic here, because I was reflecting on when the ChatGPT was first launched, on the role of the developer, right? I studied computer engineering. I was a developer in my early years, many years back. And I was thinking, okay, we are talking about we have a developer talent deficit in Europe. Now ChatGPT comes and it can generate code, right?
You sure?
So
Arguably.
Arguably, but yeah, I mean, to some extent, okay.
Right.
What is the role? What is the future of my profession? Okay, the creator of the technology, will be out of job, right? But I think it's we all need to adjust to that, because yes, it can create some code. It is generic, repeatable, easy code. Does not include the business logic, does not include the input you have from your team, maybe does not include your insights about that specific market. And it, however, can help you deliver faster your end product, okay? So I think it's a good debate, but agility, as you said, is the key.
Yeah. I think it's a healthy development, and I think how so what can't it do? It can't actually have feelings. Right? It can create feelings. You can read text and maybe it makes you feel emotion, but it doesn't know that it's creating the feelings, right? So there's still a role that, the content creator, looking at that industry in particular, plays here, which is a really significant role, because ultimately they are humans that, when it comes to content, decide whether something is good or bad. Mm-hmm. And yes, a robot can develop things, and maybe they'll develop something that is attractive to you. But they don't know that. So how do you get the robot to develop something that is attractive to you or unattractive to you?
I don't buy into the panic. I never have and never will. When you look back through the Industrial Revolution and through tons of other innovation, how many jobs have really been completely washed away and demolished?
True.
The elevator operator, maybe? I mean, I was reading a case,
Back, actually,
and they're actually coming back now, right? And so the reality is, whether it be engineering resources, right? Picking a programming language, figuring out, the architecture of how you want to build a platform or a product. That's not stuff that AI is able to do today. I do understand that, yeah, sure, it can spit out generic code, but it has to be quality tested. There's user testing that has to occur. There's just so many other variables and components to building products and platforms. It's not just about writing code. And so I just think that I just don't buy into the panic.
It's a shift of the workforce. It's not an elimination.
It's not too different from the tools that have evolved over time, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's just another tool.
Right.
So another question coming from a student, most probably, Labis. Some important steps someone has to do during university time in order to become an entrepreneur later. So what is our advice to students?
So I'm happy to take this because, I am a student of Bill Oletz. And as some of you know, I teach at Sloan and teach an entrepreneurship class. We believe at the Trust Center that we can teach entrepreneurship. And that's why Chuck and I have a job there, right? And so
I just said we couldn't teach entrepreneurship.
I know, but you are a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship. And so I think we actually are saying the same thing, but a little bit differently. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but people that are born at a different place, we start at a different point. And some people have the innate ability to be able to articulate a business idea, see sort of, where the puck is going, easier than others. But I have taught students that are very technical, that are afraid of being in front of a stage, how to stand in front of a stage and present in a really polished way and put their message across. And so there are skills that you are born with, and then there are skills that you need to acquire and develop. It is building a muscle. And so when yesterday I had the honor of going to the University of Piraeus here, and I thought I was going to present to 50 or so students. There were over 500 students in the room and 200 in the hallways outside. Wow. In terms of the thirst for information and to talk about how entrepreneurship, first of all, entrepreneurship is human nature, right? There was a study in South Korea. They put a lot of money and emphasis around how can we teach entrepreneurship, let's teach it. And they weren't able to teach it. But then they saw these pockets of really great entrepreneurial developments happening in the country. Well, when they look back, it wasn't the money that they spent in an academic setting. It was people that had immigrated from North Korea into South Korea. It is entrepreneurship by necessity. And so when you see in some of these emerging ecosystems, it gives people the power to take over and control their destiny and their livelihoods. And that's powerful. And so what can you be studying as a student? Well, first of all, take on some risk, learn things, be curious, ask questions, go do an internship for somebody and do it for free. Just immerse yourself around people that can create a way of thinking to make you malleable and curious.
So I think if you have so the question was a student asking what they should focus on. Yes. So I think if you have a knack for a science or an engineering or a STEM, as we call it in the U.S., science, technology, what is STEM?
Engineering,
mathematics. There we go. Science and covers that stuff. So I think if that's something that you enjoy and you're okay at, developing those tools as a student is really that's a good time to develop those tools. You can develop entrepreneurship tools at any stage. I didn't develop any entrepreneurship tools until I was thrown into being CEO of a company. I had focused, I had a PhD in electrical engineering. That's all I had done. And I was able to learn the other stuff later on. Not that it can't be reversed, but it is, I think, a more natural procession to sort of learn the hard skill tools at a younger age and then learn how to monetize things, how to create value. Now, of course, there are people who don't want to do that, and then you can focus just on entrepreneurship and business building from day one. That's a perfectly noble, acceptable, difficult, equally difficult path.
I think we can't ignore the business aspect here as well,
Yes.
though.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's great engineers and great ideas that go to nothing
Most
because
of
of
the
the
time,
lack
actually.
of business acumen. So taking classes in business is a great idea to understand how to take it to the next level and create a company. And a company means business.
Yes,
So in
you
so
have
many
to.
aspects.
I think that the AI keynote earlier raised a lot of questions around ethics and AI and risks with AI powered startups. Any thoughts here, any considerations? What would be potential ethical implications when AI will be making decisions on finance or healthcare or other industries?
I don't really have
one.
an opinion.
I-
It's over my head.
Whoever.
We've talked enough about it.
Well, I'll say one thing, which is, you know, I practiced law for a long time. And practicing law and representing clients is not just about knowing the law, which I think AI can certainly spit out case studies and doctrine and so on and so forth. But most times, when it comes to trying to bring resolution to a dispute, it's about human elements, which we touched upon earlier, which is really understanding, well, you know, at the Harvard Negotiation Project, we talk about BATNA, best alternative to no agreement, right? How is a machine supposed to understand really the complexities around the decision making, the timing, the risk, where you are in your life, what other variables can impact you know, your ability to resolve a dispute or bring together a contractual agreement, and where to place value on one versus the other. That is a risky proposition, and it's not black and white.
Yeah, I agree. It can give recommendations, but in the end, the decision making should be
Right.
human because it needs to take all those parameters that
Yeah,
you
the gray
mentioned.
areas will remain gray.
I think, for example, that's a prime example of where AI could actually assist lawyers in generating, you know, opinions and arguments and processing doctrines and case studies faster.
The research and such.
The research
By the
and
way,
such.
in the Wall Street Journal article, lawyers were at the top of the list. This is at risk as well.
Yeah. Well, that's why I left for technology years ago.
Yeah.
There are some questions around technologies that we didn't discuss so much, like quantum computing.
Yeah, I was going to mention quantum.
Yeah.
Because I'm on a board of a company in quantum.
Can you,
Well, he's a senior lecturer, so I'll let him take the quantum
Do you
question.
see-
Yeah.
As an opportunity
Quantum is it's an amazing technology that will be the next wave of computers. The question is when and how much patience you have. Microsoft has a quantum computer.
We do.
Google, Amazon, that's about it. And there's an ecosystem that's starting to formulate around the quantum environment, with software and platforms being delivered and so on. But they're very dependent on the large companies because a quantum computer costs tens of millions of dollars to have. But it will be a factor in the future. It is the next natural stage of what a computer will look like. And put that together with AI and you really get some scary results. Think about it, because it's 10 times faster than a supercomputer right
It's
now.
the next generation of warfare is what it is.
It may well be. That would be a very scary phenomenon.
I mean,
That, by the way, is also why many countries are working on quantum, because they think of the security. I mean, it can overcome security in many ways because it has such a
The computing power is so
Power,
robust.
yes.
That's right. So it's changing the dynamic. It's just not now.
Right.
And the testing will happen, and the expense is way out of whack to what companies can appreciate right now and use the power of it at this stage yet.
So we have only 3.5 minutes, so I'm trying to see if there is any. There was a question about the talent in the organization. We discussed about people and how the leader, the entrepreneur, should be giving, transparency and trusting the people. But any thoughts about the talent?
The hardest
needed?
thing with talent is when you realize someone's not good and you have to get rid of them.
Why are there so many advertisements of talent companies on TV all the time, right? It's such an important part.
It is.
It's like a sports team. Without talent, you're nothing. And it's the same in companies.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. So you hear about all these different companies that are recruiting people constantly, right?
Yeah, it's. I think. Look, the bottom line is when people ask like what I'm most proud of at Stavvy or even my prior companies, we were ranked number 8 in the country last year for a startup employer by Forbes, ranked again this year by Forbes as a top startup employer. And it's because we lead with empathy. We create professional development opportunities for our people within the organization. I think a lot of organizations miss that people may start in a particular department or role or function and want to go and evolve into something different. And they don't create that organic growth within the organization. When you have a culture fit, and culture is sometimes so hard to nail, especially as you hit massive growth. And so, creating opportunities for people to feel safe. One of the things I mentioned in my workshop today is the biggest symptom, the biggest red flag is when we do quarterly culture surveys. Is if I got that survey back and we were scoring 100% across the board, that is the number one symptom. There's a serious
Something's
problem
wrong.
in your organization.
Yeah. I fully agree. And I think one of the findings about the younger generation entering now the workforce is that they value that type of companies who offer them opportunities to grow, to learn, but to grow as well, from career perspective, from experiences they can gain across different
And there are a lot of
roles.
tools with feedback that
Yes.
companies
Absolutely.
appreciate now.
Yes.
That never took place when you
But
had
you
a
should
review
listen
every
to the
year.
feedback
Yeah,
and
a lot
take
more data.
action on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You should listen to the feedback. You should be open-minded
Exactly.
to listen to the feedback and then
Exactly.
take action on it.
Yep.
You need
Just
to be
doing it-
malleable.
Exactly.
Agility, respect,
Just doing
communication.
the survey and doing nothing is,
Yeah.
Okay, so we are closing now. Any closing thoughts about entrepreneurs in the room? One piece of advice each. We have a few seconds, so I want you to be brief.
I think that the best advice I can give you is being an entrepreneur, and certainly being a founder, is a lonely place. So build a community and a network around you that can support you. It doesn't matter if you have co-founders. You still need people that you can go to and turn to for advice and guidance, or sometimes just a shoulder to cry on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you grow a company as an entrepreneur and it's highly successful, you may not be the person to run that company to the next level, and don't feel bad about that. I've been on too many boards where the person wouldn't let go. And to let go is a good thing. And most great entrepreneurs will just go to the next project and do it again.
Michael?
Pick your team wisely. Your investors, your employees, your partners, your customers, because you're going to live with them. So pick carefully, embrace it.
Pick your investor.
Make it work.
Your investor.
Yes, it's more serious than a marriage.
Certainly pick your investor carefully.
Yeah, because they can beat you up.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
It was a great discussion. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, right on time.
Thank you to all of you for being with us today on day one. We have come to the end of day one. I hope you enjoyed it. We will be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for day two. Day two is filled with very interesting panels and keynotes on sustainability, on health, on deep tech, as well as our startup competition and award ceremony. So please come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And for now, we will have our happy hour just outside. So please join us for the happy hour, and I will see you all there. And remember to also return your headsets and get your IDs back. So see you at the happy hour. Thank you.